Okay, let's get into the Jets' point of view. I'm going to start off by saying this. If you told me 5 or 6 days ago, before this trade happened, you said, John, they're going to find a way to trade. Well, not they're going to find a way. Jamal desperately wanted out. And I kept saying, well, this isn't the NBA. It's hard to force, a team's hand. Now, when you just talk mad shit about a coach and you blast them in the papers like Jamal did, it worked. Now, Jamal has requested, before he got traded, about 6 trades. So it finally worked. And Joe Douglas, who I've never met personally. I emailed once. I was trying to have him actually on this show during the coronavirus. Maybe we'll be able to get him now over the next month. We'll see. But I've had friends that work with him, obviously in Philadelphia, and they love the guy. They think very, very highly of the guy. If you said, John, what would you imagine? They pull off a trade for Jamal Adams. He gets a lot. What would you think he would get? I'd say a first and a second. So when you say 2 1s, a 3, and a player, that's a haul. For a player that does not want to be there, you get rid of him. You didn't draft him. You didn't hire this coach. This whole debacle. The Jets had an article came out last week on their owner, who's actually owns the team, but he's not the active owner because the brother's in control. He's in politics now, represents America in some other country. I'm not smart enough to even figure out what the hell he's doing. But he had some racist comments. The Jets are a disaster. As a West Coast guy, I get tired of hearing about the Jets. It's one thing when you got Rex Ryan, you're going to AFC Championship games, you got Revis and Sanchez. It's another thing when you just suck. And yet, Northeast bias, the Northeast elites, they love the big markets, which, trust me, I'm a big market guy. But it's just when your team sucks, I got nothing to say about you. Joe Douglas did a really good job. Let me start it by saying that. But here's one thing that kind of doesn't bother me, but no one ever brings up. People are like, oh, you got 2 1s. All 1s are not equal. 2 picks in the 20s are not the same as pick 5. There was an article after the NFL draft that said when you went to the value chart, actually someone with the 49ers sent me this too, the value chart of what the Raiders, the trade they made for Khalil Mack, and just pick 13 and what the 49ers ultimately did with it, trading back and then using that pick to get back in the first round, was almost equal. Because for Khalil Mack, when they got 2 1s, and remember they swapped the 2, it was one thing, the Bears might have been bad. If those 2 picks had been pick 8 and pick 10, that would have been a haul. You know what it actually turned out to be? Pick 24 and 19. And then the Bears got pick 45. Jalen Ramsey. The Jacksonville Jaguars just used the Rams pick. It was pick 20. Now, the Rams actually might not be as good this year. We're going to find out. But let's say the Rams go 9-7 again. So pick 20 and pick 20 for Jalen Ramsey. You drafted the guy 5 overall. Khalil Mack, 5 overall. Jamal Adams, 6 overall. You draft, you use a high pick on these guys, and then the guy becomes good, and then you give him away for 2 1s, which on paper, and I'm not blaming Joe Douglas for this, because there's not another team in the league offering multiple 1s, so he's got to take the deal. But more than likely, these picks are going to be in the 20s. And the pressure on him, now he can use those picks to trade for players, like Minnesota just, got pick 22 for Diggs. So you can use that capital to trade for players. It doesn't limit you just to the draft. But we just act like, oh, you didn't just get pick 5 and pick 7, right? So I think sometimes Laramie Tunsil, everyone crushes Bill O'Brien. I can't believe you traded multiple 1s and a 2 for Laramie Tunsil. Well, 1, he got back Kenny Stills. And 2, Bill O'Brien makes the playoffs every year. Last year, he won a playoff game. What was that pick, 25? 26 to get a starting left tackle? Now, if they suck, which they're not going to, and you get pick 7, it's one thing. But you traded Laramie Tunsil, your starting left tackle, who you actually got lucky to get because he put on the weed mask and fell in the draft, was supposed to go number 1 overall, and you traded him for 2 picks probably in the 20s. So sometimes when you make one of these crazy trades and that team ends up sucking, remember the Rams, when they traded for Jared Goff, they had a shitty first season, and the Titans ended up with pick 3 and pick 5. That works out. But when you just get 2 picks in the 20s, I think we act like on paper it's some great haul when we don't actually know what it is. And let's face it, as I said earlier, it's hard to judge these trades immediately beside like, yeah, it looks good on paper, but let's see where the picks end up. Because when the Raiders gave Khalil Mack to the Chicago Bears, they thought the Bears were going to be a 5 or 6 win team. First year they went 12-4. Last year was a disaster. They went 8-8. And the pick was 19. So we'll have to see where this... here's what I know. Seattle's going to be in the playoffs next year. Lock. 100%. Period, point blank. There's only one... The only chance that the Seattle Seahawks draft pick is not in the 20s if Russell Wilson has a major injury. Last time I checked, Russell Wilson's never missed a game in the NFL. As durable of a player as there is currently in the National Football League. So I think if you just, based on his resume, you go, yeah, Russell's not going to miss a game. Well, if Russell Wilson plays 16 games, they're winning 10 plus. Especially now you factor in Jamal. So then the pressure goes on Joe Douglas. Again, he inherited this mess. This Woody Johnson, Adam Gase, Jamal Adams mess. He had nothing to do with it. He inherited it. And I don't blame him for not wanting to extend the player when you're not winning with the player. It makes sense to get rid of him when you can get this haul, especially with an opinionated guy, given the type and style in which he plays, no problem. But here's another thing that this brought into the light. And Phil Savage, who ironically now works for the Jets, told me this a while ago. He did Alabama radio in the SEC. And I think the NFL is a lot like this. Certain divisions are like this in the NFL, but certain cities are like this in the NFL. And New York, Philly, Boston are definitely like this. In the SEC, every team operates like this. When a snowball of negativity starts happening and the avalanche comes down on your coach, there is no stopping it. And I think at the time we had a mutual friend, Jim McElwain, who was at Florida. Remember the picture of him naked on the shark? Now, it wasn't even him. And remember the first 2 years of Jim McElwain, he went to the SEC title game, but everyone's like, well, the SEC East sucks. And then it's like they were looking for a reason. And when they look for a reason in the SEC, you're dead man walking. You cannot avoid getting got, right? It happened to it happens to a lot of coaches in the SEC. Once you're in their crosshairs of your administration, of the fan base, and Paul Feinbaum's talking about you, it's over. And same thing in New York. It happened with Todd Bowles. It's happened with McAdoo. It happened last year with Pat Shurmur. It happened with Chip Kelly. It obviously doesn't happen with Belichick, but it happens, with baseball with some of their managers. It happened with Tito Francona. And right now it's on Adam Gase. And I think if you look at Adam Gase, and listen, he was Sean McVay, he was Kyle Shanahan, he was Kingsbury and LaFleur before all these guys. The young hotshot. Clearly something was off. And while Peyton Manning signed off on him, John Elway would not. And I think John Elway, the 49ers, when they fired Jim Harbaugh, they were going to hire Adam Gase. Trent Baalke was going to hire him. Something happened last minute. I think a lot of people think it was John Elway, bad-mouthed him. It didn't happen. They went with Tom Sula. And a couple years later, Adam Gase becomes the head coach in Miami. That first year, they made the playoffs. And it was like, God. And remember, Tannehill got hurt, and they still made the playoffs. Now, they got blown out in a game against the Steelers, but still, made the playoffs in Miami, a joke franchise. That's impressive. And ever since then, it's been a disaster. And him getting this job, and even last year, though, with the mono, they somehow still went 7-9. It was weird. You had multiple players bad-mouthing him. You had, when Sam got mono, remember, they started a quarterback who didn't take any reps during the regular season. And it's just one thing after another. His opening press conference with the eyes going all over the place. He can't avoid this negative avalanche that's coming. And I think there is not a coach right now, and that I include Dan Quinn, who I'd say probably who seats the hottest, but not hotter than Adam Gase, because people want this guy gone. And Joe Douglas didn't hire him, though I guess from what I've heard, they're friends. They knew each other from Chicago. It's just the Jets who invested all this. Remember, they went from 6-3, gave up pick 6 and 3 second-rounders to get Sam. And I think Sam's going to be good. But if Sam, let's say, has a good year and wants Adam gone, he's gone. If they don't probably go 500 or above, when I say 500, like they got to go 9-7 and probably make the playoffs. Adam Gase is done. He's dead man walking right now. And it's all kind of pointing at him. They can say whatever they want. I know Joe Douglas on Monday said he's the right coach for this job. Everyone's after him. It just happened 2 years ago with Todd Bowles. We saw it happen across the street. Technically, they play in the same spot with Pat Shurmur in McAdoo. In that city, with that edgy fan base and the type people in the Northeast, when they want you gone, there is no surviving it. And Jamal Adams, listen, he crushed the guy. And, absolutely eviscerated him. Now, you could say he was doing everything possible to get out. If he was the only guy saying something negative about Adam Gase, I'd say, listen, maybe they just didn't see eye to eye. That happens. It's football. It's a contentious environment. Bill Belichick's famous line is there's no growth out of a little confrontation. A lot of coaches like confrontation because you grow from it. And in football, unlike normal society, you get yelled at. I got yelled at as a staff member. Players get yelled at as players. Other coaches get yelled at by head coaches. People get yelled at. It's an edgy environment. This is not your local restaurant. People are on eggshells. The best franchise in the league the last 20 years, no franchise has more eggshells. Now, listen, Pete Carroll, Andy Reid, they're not always like that, but it's intense. You're playing to win. A lot of money on the line. billion-dollar franchises. And everyone's looking at this guy right now. Because it wasn't just Jamal Adams. It's been countless players when he showed up. It was guys in Miami. People just think the guy's a weirdo. And the one thing he always hung his hat on, well, he's an offensive genius. Well, it's kind of time to get something done this year. You've added some offensive linemen. You got a star, we think, young quarterback. You got a good running back. They're going to have to be successful. The division's wide open because if they're not, Adam Gase is going to get fired. What's up, everybody? My name is John Middlekauff, and I host a show for Colin Cowherd called 3 and Out on his podcast network. You can subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. I worked in the NFL as a scout for Andy Reid and Howie Roseman, and I've been talking about football for the last 7 years. If you like your football talk, raw and unfiltered, no BS, I'm your guy. Subscribe to 3 and Out right now.